What's up, guys? This is Jared. I'm the founder and CEO of Luminous. Luminous is supply chain and inventory management for the modern e-commerce brand. So we help the modern e-commerce company get past their first critical mass event. I have plenty of content on that if you want to see. If you want to follow Luminous's journey as we become the top inventory management solution for e-commerce, follow along. So today I wanted to guide you through a framework on how you choose a software or a tool for your supply chain. So I routinely run into prospects all the time who it's the same story. Hey, I'm using ShipStation and Google Sheets, or I'm using order management tool X in Google Sheets and maybe an inventory solution, and it's not working for me. I'm experiencing pain point X, Y, and Z. In other words, it's not solving my supply chain problems. Anywhere from purchasing to forecasting, pick and pack, more advanced WMS features, etc. The general idea is it's not serving me. And I don't know why, or they might think they know why. So I wanted to introduce today a framework that we walk prospects through in order for them to make a decision on what the best tool or the best feature is for their business. It is my belief that out of all of the systems in the market, NetSuite, Dynamics 365, some tools that are down market like SKUVault or Katana or Skubana, Extensive, 3PL Central, LinWorks, all these different tools. It's my belief that it's not whether or not it's a good or a bad tool, it's whether or not it's a good or a bad fit for your business. And also, you need to answer the question, what amount of processes and friction are you willing to accept in order to implement a tool? So this framework will help you identify where you're at on that curve, and hopefully it will prevent you from either over-implementing on software and feeling the pain of over-implementing and overpaying, or under-implementing and the cost of under-implementing. So let me walk you through this. To set up the framework, I have a super simple line graph. All right, so I have complexity and processes on the y-axis and time and business. So the assumption here, as your business grows over time, you will get more and more complex, pretty obvious. These represent markers in your history that might represent events that led to more complexity or a need for another solution or another feature. So on this curve, there is ideal complexity introduced at a certain time. Like ideally, this is what the curve looks like. Only as you grow, you initiate more complexities, processes, and software. The reason why that matters is because if you are underneath your complexity, so for example, your software and your processes are under-implemented under complexity, then you are feeling pain right here for lack of processes and lack of solution. The inverse is also true. When you're feeling that, don't over-implement. If you over-implement processes and software, that's equally as painful and could spiral you out of business. So how do you identify just the right amount of processes and software, and which software is right for you? Because timing does matter, and the solution that you choose does matter. The price point does matter. You will feel the pain if you over-implement or you under-implement. So how do we identify where we are on this curve, and how do we make the best decision for our supply chain? Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a prospect that I did this with today. I thought it was a great example of the modern e-commerce brand and some of the fallacies or maybe mistakes that she made where she might have under-implemented, and the pain that she's now feeling, and the process of guiding her to a decision of, what should you do next? Okay, so we're going to start out with the side that I like the most. This is when a brand will under-implement. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you under-implement. Let's dive into this. I did a demo with a company who they thought they were a bridal retail store. That's what they thought, and which led to there wasn't anything wrong with their decisions early on, but it led them to implement a very niche and smaller ERP system for the bridal industry called Bridal Live. Just for reference, this is kind of the cost of their tech stack. So they had Bridal Live and BigCommerce. Okay, so these were the assumptions that they made when they were implementing Bridal Live. Okay, so they started experiencing pain points of what they thought was a bridal store, and they got pitched and sold Bridal Live. So on this axis right here, the same chart, simple stuff, complexity on the y-axis, and your time in business. Okay, so these were the projected markers of a bridal business, let's say like 10 years ago or something. So when they were starting out their business, this was sort of their projected velocity of how quickly they would, how complex they would get in the processes they would most likely need as they grew. Okay, so this was sort of like their idea. Okay, first we're going to open up our retail store, and then we're going to need some inventory tracking, and then we're going to do a second retail store, and then we're going to need custom booking because we're a bridal business. And after that, we're going to need like an advanced CRM with merging that will help merge the bridal appointments and sizing and move it into an invoice. And then we'll have 5+ storefronts and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of assumptions made around the type of business that they were. So what ended up happening with this tech stack right here, BrightAlive and BigCommerce, this is what ended up happening. So their projected complexity curve and then their actual complexity in processes implemented relative to what they thought, it actually looked a little bit more like this. They only actually implemented this much of the system, you know? They got to about their second store, didn't even really use custom bookings. Why was that? Why were they underutilizing the BrightAlive platform? And why, so when they came to me, were they experiencing these pain points? They said, there's just like, man, does BrightAlive suck or do I suck at operations? Like, well, no, BrightAlive doesn't suck if you're a bridal retail store. It's actually really good. And it's pretty cheap. Maybe the support isn't that great, but like it's a cheap system and it does a lot for that industry. But here's the problem. She was coming to me with all these issues, real issues right here, like real problems. Man, my channel syncs with BigCommerce don't work. Like BrightAlive was not built to interface with BigCommerce very well. I'm overselling on inventory. I'm under purchasing because the forecasting isn't correct. My inventory numbers are inaccurate. I can't route orders between these two stores because I'm using these two stores like fulfillment centers. Big issues here. And so what she was experiencing right here is this is under implemented. So this right here, these pain points are coming from being under implemented. Okay, why was she under implemented? Well, she had a false understanding of what complexity was actually going to be added over time. She more resembled an actual like multi-channel e-commerce company, like the evolution of like a modern e-commerce brand instead of just like a niche bridal store. Alrighty, so this was more of her evolution with her complexity. Okay, so this was the actual versus projected. Okay, so instead of what I was just showing you, these were more like her events, and she wasn't being reactive to these. Selling to retail stores, that was really like the first mark. Open up direct-to-consumer sales, which needed more WMS order routing, more pick and pack settings. Channel syncs as you go multi-channel in e-commerce. Then she expanded to wholesale, like specialty wholesale, which introduced issues with inventory allocation. So this is what caused her under-implementation, and the system that she had in place, BrightAlive and BigCommerce, were not addressing these actual markers of complexity, which led to these pain points. So this is under implementation. So what is the cost of under implementation? Well, the cost is you're typically not scaling as fast as you could. This almost always represents room for growth. So if I can stop my overselling of inventory or underselling or underpurchasing, or if I can route orders more effectively, or if I can have more visibility, 9 times out of 10, that leads to more growth. She can dump her time into the business of expanding wholesale or expanding to other revenue streams or really doubling down on Shopify and Amazon. There's a lot that she could do instead of manually updating inventory numbers on BigCommerce, or it represents an inability to scale or to get past this first critical mass of it. So she's experiencing this right now. All right, so that's what under implemented looks like. And honestly, you could just replace this tech stack with like Google Sheets and ShipStation. That's like super common. I see this all the time. You're doing $1 million, $2 million a year, and you're on Google Sheets and ShipStation, and you're starting to experience similar pain points right here. And you're wondering like, geez, like why am I having these issues? Well, it's probably because ShipStation isn't made to do all of these things effectively. So let's now move to the other example, which is if I over implement. The inverse is actually true as well. So this is what it feels like to be under implemented and underserved in your software and your processes. This is what it feels like to be over implemented. So same thing. I'm going to do another example on this. We'll just say like an imaginary brand is using like Finale inventory, that's the cost, and then ShipStation. Okay. So let's say this is sort of their ideal complexity curve, right? And this is their evolution as a brand. So early in their history, they outsourced to 3PL, which introduces some complexity. Then they expand to Amazon. Then they become multi-channel distribution, and they need min-maxes and forecasting for all those distribution centers and all those inputs and outputs. Then they start specialty wholesale. Then they start big box retail, which introduces EDI, or it may be just like a potential future one. They're considering taking on funding, so they'll need better financials, so better integration with QuickBooks. Little things like this. So this, you get the general idea. So the actual curve of their complexity of their processes and their software implemented looks something like this, right? So they probably started right here, didn't really have much, we're just using Google Sheets, and then all of a sudden, boom, they implemented Finale Inventory, for example, which is like a more down market inventory tool. Or maybe they did ShipStation and Finale Inventory at the same time, let's just say that. Okay, oh, and then it starts dropping, they start getting more complex. It's starting to not service them, especially when they introduce wholesale, and then they're starting to have these issues, and boom, they're starting to experience that under implementation right here, and they're really wanting to scale to that next level because they can really see some benefit in expansion of big box retail and also wholesale. They're getting some good revenue, so they're like, shoot, we need another system. This is where you see brands over implement right here, okay? So at this crucial point, this is where a lot of brands choose to go to like a big, hairy ERP. So I'm going to throw in NetSuite right here. So because typically what I see, NetSuite tries to go down market and fit a square peg into a round hole all the time. They're like, hey, we're NetSuite, or I'm Acumatica, or Dynamics 365, or like insert massive ERP here, and we're going to come and over implement you. And so what ends up happening is brands get sold on massive ERPs where they say, hey, you know, you're doing this, like the big box retail, and you just introduced some wholesale, and you need some better financials if you guys are going to fundraise. Well, we're NetSuite. We're the biggest in the market. We can do everything. We can literally do anything. And they'll start throwing out like form names like, oh, EDI is like the 862s and the 246s and the 931s. We can do all that. And what ends up happening is operators are just sort of like, they're talked over, and they're not really understanding exactly the complexities that are needed to be solved, and they end up going with NetSuite. And that over implementation looks like this. Okay, so not only is there pain of price, okay, which NetSuite, say for this brand, they'll probably quote them at like $200,000 and like I'll say $7,000 a month. I'm pretty familiar with the big ERP prices. It's probably something like that all in. $200,000 inflation, $7,000 up front. So they go from this cost to this cost. So this has just introduced unnecessary friction, and you feel it. You might not feel it immediately, but you will eventually feel it, and you will eventually stop using this big system. And not only that, but you, when your contract renewal is up, they will say, hey, you know how we said we're NetSuite? Well, cost is now $8,000 a month. And the brand is sitting there just like, dude, like my actual use of your software, it's like right here. Let me show you. This is why the NetSuite contract negotiation at year 2, after you made this mistake, feels like this. You're like, are you kidding me? You're raising my prices to $8,000? Like, you weren't even really servicing me exactly as I needed. I'm not even using all of your features now. So this right here is the unnecessary friction introduced when you implement a big system, when you over implement. So what does that actually look like? I'll give you an example. So what does over implemented actually feel like? Well, it feels like too much friction and too much processes. Initially, they were just thinking like, well, I started selling to Target and Scheels, so like I needed EDI, and I also started doing specialty wholesale, and I was doing invoicing on QuickBooks, and it wasn't syncing with my inventory management system, or it wasn't syncing with ShipStation. So like they start experiencing that pain because of introduced complexity. And then on top of that, there's this one like sort of future event, like I might take on funding, which means I'll need more complex financial reporting. This is where the fallacy is. You don't, if you're trying to solve these things, you don't need NetSuite for that. You don't need Acumatica. You don't need Dynamics 365. You might, but you'd have to be pretty damn complex in a pretty big company to actually need those services. And this is where plotting out the y-axis of your company is so important. If you're feeling pain, why? What event in your history caused you to start feeling pain? Identify it and try to look at solutions that will solve this without adding so much friction and processes. Why is this important? Because if you go to NetSuite and you are stuck in a $7,000, $8,000 a month contract, it's going to feel like this. So too much friction, too much processes. I'll give you an example. So this is something I see all the time. So people think, for example, like, man, when I go, for example, I go multi-channel distribution and I just want more visibility as I send goods to and from my 3PL or to and from Amazon. It's a common thing like, man, I just wish I had more visibility here. Okay, so here was my transfer order before I implemented like NetSuite or SAP. Okay, and I think I want this visibility. And here's what my process looks like before. Zero friction. It's like, tell Billy Joe that I'm sending 100 units to Amazon. Okay, and then I go update 100 units in my Amazon store and I just take it out of my Google Sheet. Done. No friction. Now, there's a cost to that, right? If you're wanting really good forecasting and inventory visibility and you want to make sure that every input and output is correct so that you can have good forecasting, so that you can purchase correctly, so that you can have optimal scaling of your brand. Yes, that's important. Like having the visibility instead, just like not being on a Google Sheet and having that in your actual inventory software that ties into your forecasting, that is important. But if you think you need NetSuite to solve that, you might regret it a little bit later on. And let me show you. So that's what an operator thinks he wants, or he might actually want that. Like that's fair. That's fair to want that. Or they might want this to tie into their forecasting better, or be taken away from their forecasting, whatever it is. So let me show you what a transfer order might look like on SAP, and you might not realize this. So after you paid $200,000, $300,000 to implement SAP, and a lot of other things have changed, and you changed a lot of other processes, instead of going to Google Sheets and taking out 100 and now just adding that to Amazon, look at what you just introduced. Here's a transfer order on SAP. So you can create a transfer order. You got to add all of these different things. You got to choose the warehouse. You have to set different warehouse rules. You have to route an actual path for this order creation. You'll have to there might be approval processes that you have to go through. You might have to, you'll have to take this now through pick and pack if that warehouse will make you do that. So now you have to do a transfer order, then you have to pick it, you have to initiate the picking and stop the picking and then finish it. And then you have to add a delivery note, and then you have to go to the display of the transfer order, blah, 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 blah. You get it. So, hey, I wish I could see incoming on my transfer orders. That doesn't mean you need SAP. Do you feel the unnecessary friction, the unnecessary processes? Could you feel potentially like how that could cost you as a business? How you thought you were going to get up here with NetSuite, but really you just over-implemented, and it's really uncomfortable. And in fact, when your contract bumps up next year, it's a tough conversation. It's a hard place to be an operator. So this is, again, I'm going to do a more updated model. So I have different archetypes of the modern e-commerce brands. I feel like most e-commerce companies can fit in certain archetypes, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and your complexity, I can reasonably well plot out like what the path of complexity is and probably what a good system could be for you. And I'll do that in another video. In this video, I just want to introduce this framework and maybe explain why it feels like you're over implemented, like you overextended to NetSuite, or you're under implemented on your current solution, and there's a lot of pain there. So where Luminous tries to fit, or where we do fit, is I do not want to force you onto our system. Like if Luminous is overkill for you, then it's not a good fit. Like if you're just a brand selling on Shopify and you have one warehouse and you have like 2 products, yeah, don't use Luminous. Like we're too complicated for you. But with that being said, the whole goal of Luminous, like my why behind Luminous, is we fit right here. And it's in how we monetize, how we service. We come in and we say, hey, let's implement, for example, this transfer order and give you the visibility that you want with the least amount of friction possible. Okay? Or let's give you the value of a forecast or aggregate your wholesale data with the least amount of friction possible. That looks more like this. And then you do the next feature. And you do the next feature. And only when we're actually helping you scale, we monetize. That's the goal of Luminous. That's how we're disrupting. If this is interesting to you, then follow for some more content ideas. I'm going to break down this framework more in depth for like the modern e-commerce brands, and I'll give you different archetypes that you can identify with. I'll even have a chart where you can actually assess the cost of implementing a new process or a new tool or a new feature. So look out for that if you're interested. Anyways, thanks guys. Peace.